So you have a pretty good list, and you no longer have that blank page just staring you in the face. From here, you need to narrow the focus, though. After all, anything that takes several years to complete, such as a college education, would take a lot more time and space than we have to complete a simple writing assignment. So at this stage, you still need to make decisions about the focus and the purpose of the assignment, and these can usually be answered by the assignment instructions. I could use the examples I've listed in a lot of different ways, depending on how I combine them, but since I need to narrow it down to just 3, I want a logical connection between those that I choose. This involves going back and carefully reading guidelines and directions. Don't ever forget to do that. I've chosen 3 different topics. I'm going to look at literature, history, and humanities, and I'm probably going to have to look at good ways to organize them. Probably put history first, because that is going to be able to lay a foundation. Then I can look at some things with humanities, because that's a little bit more focused than just politics or government or some of the other aspects of history. Finally, within humanities, I'm going to look at a third point, literature, because that's one facet of the humanities, and it's one that tells a story, so it would make for a nice continuity. So my assignment was 3 interesting things one might learn in college. The purpose of the paper is to be informative, as opposed to arguing, persuading, comparing, etc. My focus is going to be the liberal arts, which are often part of general education requirements. Any essay is required to start with an introduction, and you don't want to just start very broadly. You want to jump right in. I'll give a couple of opening statements that discuss how college coursework can prepare a student for, say, a richer life and better understanding of human experience. That's going to show I'm narrowing my focus. My thesis statement would list my 3 points, in this case, history, humanities, and literature. The first point that I'm going to talk about, so we're moving on in our outline. First, I'm going to talk about history for the reasons that I mentioned before. It's going to lay a pretty good basic foundation, the order of events of what's happened in the world. I want to give a couple of examples to explain why this is important. I'll start with ancient history, and I'll maybe mention things about, say, where the earliest societies were located. We sometimes hear the term cradle of civilization. There were several societies in the Mesopotamian region, which is what this refers to. I'm also going to give a second example, modern history. I think in that case I might mention the 2 major conflicts in the first half of the 20th century, World War I and World War II, and briefly summarize what the fighting was about or some of the nature of those conflicts. Then I would be finished with that first thesis point, because those are some pretty important things that I might learn in a college course that covers history or the humanities or even government. So for my second thesis point, I'm going to talk about humanities courses. And it's a subject that a lot of people wonder, what is this about? But it's a look at all of the different ways that people have expressed and recorded their experiences throughout history. And it involves the arts, it involves philosophy, it involves religion. So since I've spoken about ancient history before, I'm going to speak of ancient humanities. And one example of that would be learning about the relics from ancient Egypt. We might look at architecture, the pyramids, hieroglyphics and their system of recording and how writing was an incredibly important part of Egyptian life. Look at mythology and their rituals, since they survived for 2,000 years based on having these same rituals and beliefs passed down to them for many, many generations. I would also want to go back to my 20th century point, a nice contrast, and talk about how artworks in the 20th century might reflect specifically patriotism and the turmoil of living through all these wars and conflicts in that first half of the 20th century. So not just facts, which history gives us, but also people's reactions or the abilities to deal with them. And anything from Sousa marches, which are highly patriotic, to the Pablo Picasso painting Guernica that looks at something horrible that happened during the Spanish Civil War, right there as the seeds of the Second World War were being sown, would be excellent examples to refer to. Finally, my third point would be literature. And I want to once again go back to ancient history, ancient humanities, and then, as you can see, the sequence, ancient literature. I might look at an epic tale from an ancient culture that can show some universal beliefs, and that, in this case, might be the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is considered at this point to be the oldest work of literature in the world. It's a very interesting example of an epic story. Then I would circle back around to how a short story or a novel can put us into the experience of someone who's lived through a modern war. Examples for this, such as Hemingway's A Soldier's Home, or Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, or even the longer novel Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, would be great well-known war stories about those that happened in the first half of the 20th century. And they don't just give us history, they give us a lens into the minds of people who were living through it, which is going to be far more interesting than just reading a few names, dates, and dead people. Finally, I do need to end with a concluding paragraph. So I want to sum up by saying something to the effect that attending college courses can open up a universe of knowledge far more rewarding than is first apparent. And then I might recite once again what those 3 examples that I've given are. This way I've covered the assignment, and I've also given plenty of specific examples, even if I don't go into depth about them, given the constraints of the assignment. Remember that an essay is thoughts put to the page in an organized manner with supporting examples that are explained in detail. It's one of the best ways to show your thinking and comprehension of the subject at hand.